My name is Natalie Parker. I'm 31 years old. And the strange thing about being the woman everyone assumes has it together is that no one notices when your whole life is already cracking beneath the surface. Not until the moment it finally breaks. 3 days ago, I destroyed my engagement. Not impulsively, not in a screaming match, not because I stopped loving him overnight. I destroyed it by telling the truth in a room full of people. And the worst part? For the first few hours afterward, I kept asking myself whether honesty had been too cruel. I'm writing this from my childhood bedroom in my parents' house, surrounded by old trophies, faded yearbooks, and the pale blue walls my mother never bothered to repaint after I moved out. My wedding was supposed to be in October. I say was because there's no wedding anymore. No venue decisions, no first dance, no forever. Just silence, missed calls, and the kind of humiliation that settles into your bones and makes everything feel colder than it is. Before I get to what happened, you need to understand my family. My sister, Rebecca, is 34. She's 7 months pregnant with her first child after 3 years of infertility, doctor's appointments, hormone shots, miscarried hope, and the kind of grief people don't always know how to talk about. Every month, for 3 years, she had to live through that cycle of anticipation and loss. So, when this pregnancy finally held, when it stayed, our family treated it like a miracle. Because it was. My mother cried the first time she saw the ultrasound. My father, who barely reacts to anything beyond football and weather, stood in the kitchen with both hands over his mouth, like he'd forgotten how to breathe. Rebecca's husband, Adam, looked at her like she'd brought the sun back into the world. So, yes, this pregnancy was a huge deal. And last Saturday was her baby shower. My mom hosted it at my parents' house. About 40 people came. Relatives, family friends, Rebecca's co-workers, neighbors who had known us since we were kids. The whole place looked like a Pinterest board exploded in the sweetest way possible. Little woodland animals everywhere, miniature foxes and deer on the dessert table. Soft green garlands draped across the windows. Tiny mushrooms made of fondant on the cake because Rebecca is doing a forest-themed nursery. It was wholesome in that almost ridiculous way family events can be when everyone is trying their hardest. My dad was outside working the grill, even though it wasn't technically barbecue weather. My uncles were arguing about football like the draft was a matter of national security. My grandmother was correcting everyone's grammar and pretending she wasn't enjoying herself. Normal family chaos. My fiancé, Ethan, had been acting strange all morning. He changed outfits 3 times before we left our apartment. First a cream sweater, then a blue button-down, then finally a fitted beige shirt that made him ask me twice whether it made him look too broad in the middle. He stood in front of the mirror, smoothing his hand over his stomach with a tension in his face I didn't quite understand. "Do I look bloated?" he asked. I was in the bathroom touching up my mascara. "You look fine." Fine isn't the same as good. I remember laughing softly then, trying to lighten the mood. "You're going to a baby shower, not a red carpet." He didn't laugh. He just changed his watch, adjusted his collar, and looked at himself one more time, like he was preparing for some kind of test. I should have paid more attention to that, but hindsight is cruel like that. It turns ordinary moments into warnings. We got to my parents' house around 2 in the afternoon. Everything felt easy at first. Rebecca was glowing in that exhausted, emotional, 7 months pregnant way that somehow made her look more beautiful than ever. She opened gifts. She smiled through the silly guessing games. She teared up every time someone handed her something handmade. There was so much tenderness in the room, it almost made you ache. Ethan, meanwhile, was quiet. That was the first thing that really felt wrong. He's usually magnetic at events like this. The funny one, the charming one, the person who finds the best light for photos and somehow ends up in the center of every group conversation without looking like he's trying. He likes attention the way some people like music in the background. He functions better with it. But that day, He barely spoke. He sat with a glass of sparkling cider in his hand, watching Rebecca with an unreadable expression on his face. Not angry, not exactly sad either, just tight, controlled, like something inside him was being pinched smaller and smaller. At one point, I touched his arm and asked, "Are you okay?" He gave me a thin smile. "Just tired." "From what?" He looked at me then, really looked at me. And for a second, I saw something flicker there, something resentful. But it disappeared so fast, I almost thought I imagined it. "Nothing," he said. "Forget it." So I did. That's the thing I keep replaying. Not the explosion, not the microphone, not even the silence afterward. That moment. Because some part of me knew. Around 4 o'clock, my mom handed Rebecca the microphone so she could thank everyone for coming. The room softened instantly. Even my uncle stopped talking long enough to listen. Rebecca stood near the gift table with one hand resting on the curve of her stomach, and she started speaking in that trembling voice people get when they're trying very hard not to cry. She thanked everyone for showing up. She thanked Adam for being her rock through every failed cycle, every doctor visit, every month she thought she'd have to give up. She thanked our parents for never letting her lose hope. By the time she got to my grandmother, half the room was tearing up. Then she looked at me. "And Natalie," she said, smiling through tears, "thank you for always being there for me. I can't wait to see the kind of aunt you're going to be." That should have been the moment everyone remembered. Her voice shaking, my mother dabbing her eyes, my sister standing there after years of pain, finally getting her joy. Instead, Ethan stood up. At first I thought maybe he was just moving out of the way. Maybe he was going to grab another drink or step outside or do literally anything normal. But he walked straight to Rebecca, and before I could process what was happening, he took the microphone gently out of her hand and turned toward the room with a bright, practiced smile. "Actually," he said, "Natalie won't just be an aunt." He reached for my hand. "We're pregnant too. Looks like these cousins are going to grow up together." For a second, time stopped. Then the room erupted. My mother gasped so loudly it sounded like a scream. My aunts rushed toward us. Someone started crying. My grandmother pressed both hands to her chest. Questions came flying from every direction. "Oh my God, since when? How far along are you? Why didn't you tell us? This is incredible!" People were hugging me before I could even speak, and I just stood there, frozen. Because we weren't pregnant. We had never been pregnant. We weren't even trying. 2 years ago, Ethan and I had agreed we didn't want children, and I had built my future around that certainty. He knew exactly what he was saying, exactly what kind of lie he was throwing into the middle of my sister's day, and he was smiling while he did it. Smiling. I grabbed his wrist so hard he flinched. "Come with me," I said through my teeth. He let me pull him down the hallway and into the quiet space near my parents' laundry room, away from the music, the congratulations, the chaos he'd just created. The second we were alone, I let go of him. My hands were shaking. "What are you doing?" He leaned against the wall like this was inconvenient, not catastrophic. "Relax." "Relax?" My voice cracked. "You just told my entire family we're having a baby." He gave me this strange little smile. Calm, self-satisfied, almost smug. "I know." I stared at him. "We are not pregnant." "I know that too." The way he said it, light, dismissive, like I was the one being dramatic, made something icy slide down my spine. "Then why would you say it?" He crossed his arms. "Did you see your sister out there?" I blinked. "What?" "This is her 3rd event," he said. 3rd. First your mom did the gender reveal, then your aunt threw that sprinkle thing 2 weeks ago. Now this. Every family gathering for months has turned into the Rebecca show. For a moment, I honestly couldn't understand what I was hearing. "She's pregnant," I said slowly, "after 3 years of infertility." And that means she gets to monopolize everyone's attention for 9 months? I just looked at him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was trying to explain something reasonable to a child. I'm your fiancé, Natalie. We're getting married. Where's my celebration? Where's my attention? Where's yours? I felt my stomach twist. So you lied, I said. At my sister's baby shower. Because you wanted people looking at you. His jaw tightened. Don't say it like that. How else am I supposed to say it? He let out a frustrated breath and ran a hand through his hair. You always make things sound uglier than they are. I laughed once then, but there was no humor in it. You announced a fake pregnancy. It doesn't have to be a big deal. I actually took a step back. It doesn't... I stopped because I genuinely didn't know how to finish the sentence. Ethan, 40 people out there think we're having a baby. He shrugged. We'll deal with it. How? He rolled his eyes like this part should have already been obvious to me. In a few weeks, we say something happened. He looked directly at me. A loss. People will feel bad for us. And then it'll be over. I went completely still. The hallway seemed to tilt. You want to fake a miscarriage? He winced. Can you not say it like that? How else is there to say it? It's not ideal, he snapped, but it solves the problem. I was so shocked I could barely breathe. A problem you created. He spread his hands. Rebecca still gets her baby. Everyone still gets to celebrate her. This just evens things out a little. That was the moment something in me broke. Not loudly, quietly, completely. Because until then, some part of me was still hoping this was panic or stupidity or some bizarre emotional spiral he'd immediately regret. But no, he had thought this through. Not perfectly, not intelligently, but enough. Enough to decide that my sister's hard-won happiness was too bright, and the answer was to stage his own suffering so no one would forget him. After everything Rebecca had gone through, after every negative test, every silent car ride home from appointments, every smile she forced at other people's babies while grieving the child she didn't have yet, he wanted to counterfeit tragedy for attention. I looked at the man I was supposed to marry and did not recognize him. Out in the backyard, I could hear laughter, dishes clinking, someone calling for more lemonade. Life continuing. Innocent and unaware, while this ugliness sat between us in the hallway like something rotting. He took a step toward me and softened his voice. Nat, come on, don't make that face. You're acting like I killed someone. I said nothing. We can handle this, he said. Just go back out there, smile, let people be happy, and later we figure out the details. The details. Like grief was an event plan. Like pain was a costume he could put on and take off, depending on what got the most sympathy. I thought of Rebecca standing in front of everyone, one hand on her stomach, thanking us through tears. I thought of the way her smile had dimmed the instant Ethan interrupted her. I thought of my mother, already talking about baby names for cousins, my grandmother probably texting relatives, the lie multiplying by the second. And I knew if I stayed quiet, if I protected him, delayed, softened, waited, I would become part of it. I would be helping him steal something that was never his. So I turned and walked away from him. Natalie, he said sharply. I didn't stop. When I stepped back into the party, conversations were still buzzing. My mom was near the dessert table, already telling one of my aunts that, apparently, she'd be planning another shower. My grandmother was on the phone with someone, her face shining. Rebecca stood in the middle of it all looking confused, smiling because everyone else was smiling, but not fully smiling, as if somewhere deep down, she already knew something had shifted. I walked to the gift table, picked up the microphone, tapped it once. The room fell quiet. I could feel Ethan behind me before I even turned. Could feel his panic rushing in too late. I swallowed hard and said, Everyone, I need to clarify something. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. We are not pregnant. The room didn't move. Ethan made a strangled sound behind me, but I kept going. Ethan and I are not expecting a baby. I'm sorry for the confusion, but what he said isn't true. I forced myself to look at my sister. Today is Rebecca's day, and I want the focus to stay on her and her actual baby. No one spoke. No one breathed. I lowered the microphone back onto the table with shaking hands. Then 40 people turned to stare at him, and the silence that followed felt like the beginning of a disaster none of us could stop anymore. The silence didn't last long. It shattered. "Wait, what?" my aunt said first, her voice sharp and confused, cutting through the stillness like glass cracking under pressure. I didn't turn around immediately. I couldn't. I was still staring at Rebecca, trying to read her face, trying to understand how much damage had already been done in the space of a few minutes. Her hand was still resting on her stomach, but her smile? It was gone. Behind me, I heard it. A soft, broken sound. "Ethan!" Then suddenly, louder, sobbing. I turned just in time to see him bolt toward the back door, his hand covering his mouth, like he was the one who'd just been blindsided. The door slammed open, then shut again, and the sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. My mom stared at me, not angry. Not yet. Just stunned, like she was trying to rearrange reality into something that made sense. My dad came in from outside, spatula still in his hand, eyebrows drawn together. "What's going on?" Rebecca grabbed my arm. Her fingers were cold. "Natalie," she whispered. "What just happened?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and the guilt hit me all at once. Not for what I said, but for who I brought into this house in the first place. "I'll explain," I said quietly. "Just not right here." The next hour blurred into fragments. Closed doors, lowered voices. My immediate family gathered in the living room, while the rest of the guests pretended not to listen from the kitchen and backyard. I told them everything. Not all at once, not smoothly, but piece by piece. That he'd known it was a lie. That he'd said Rebecca was getting too much attention. That he wanted to level the playing field. And finally, that he planned to fake a miscarriage. My mom started crying halfway through. Not soft tears, angry ones. The kind that come from disbelief more than sadness. "He said that?" she demanded. I nodded. My dad didn't say a word, but his jaw clenched so tight I thought something might actually crack. He stared straight ahead, like he was holding himself back from doing something irreversible. Rebecca didn't cry. She just sat there, one hand still on her stomach, shaking her head slowly, like if she kept doing it long enough, maybe the story would undo itself. "That doesn't even make sense," she said under her breath. Why would he? She didn't finish the sentence, because there wasn't an answer that made it better. My phone buzzed in my hand. Once. Twice. Then again. I glanced down. "Ethan." Call. Call. Text. 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 I didn't open anything. Didn't answer. I just turned my phone face down on my thigh and kept talking. By the time I finished explaining, the damage had spread. The story had already started leaking into the rest of the house. People whispered. Doors creaked. Someone outside said, "No, seriously?" in a voice that carried too far. My grandmother, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. "Well," she said, pushing herself up from the couch. "I always said that boy smiled too much. It shouldn't have been funny." But somehow, it broke the tension just enough that my mom let out a sharp breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Almost. I stayed as long as I could. Long enough to help my mom start redirecting the party back to something resembling normal. Long enough to feel like I hadn't completely abandoned the mess I'd helped create. But eventually, I left. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Not with 40 people replaying the same moment in their heads. Not with the image of Ethan standing there, smiling, still burned into the walls. When I got back to the apartment, he was already there. Suitcase out. Clothes not leaving. Waiting. Of course he was waiting. The second I stepped inside, he turned to me. No hello. No, just that. I closed the door behind me slowly. You lied to my entire family. I was trying to fix something, he shot back. By inventing a pregnancy? By making sure we weren't invisible for once. His voice cracked on the last word, but I didn't move closer, didn't soften. I couldn't. You think this made you visible? I asked quietly. It made you look insane. His face twisted. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone. I stared at him. Do what? Expose me like that, he said. You could have just gone along with it for a little while. We could have handled it privately later. Gone along with it? I repeated. Yes! With a lie? For a few weeks, Natalie, not forever. And then what? I took a step closer now, anger finally catching up to shock. You fake a miscarriage? You want my family to comfort us over a baby that never existed? That's not the point. That is exactly the point. The words echoed between us. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he did something I didn't expect. He took off the engagement ring and threw it. It hit my chest. Not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to mean something, and dropped to the floor between us with a dull, final sound. You chose them over me, he said. My chest tightened. I chose the truth. You chose your sister, he snapped. Your family will always come first. I looked at him then, really looked, and felt something inside me settle into place. A quiet certainty. You're right, I said. He blinked. You're right, I repeated. I did choose my family. And you know why? He didn't answer. Because they didn't lie to 40 people and plan to fake a tragedy for attention. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. And because, I added softly, I don't recognize the person standing in front of me anymore. That landed. I saw it land. Something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or anger, or something uglier that I didn't have the energy to name. You're overreacting, he said. But it sounded weaker now. Am I? Yes. It was one mistake. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. It wasn't. I bent down, picked up the ring, and placed it on the kitchen counter between us. You didn't just lie, I continued. You doubled down. You justified it. You planned the next lie before the first one even settled. His breathing got heavier. That's not one mistake, I said. That's a pattern. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, fine, he snapped. If that's how you see it, then maybe we shouldn't get married. There it was, the line. The last fragile thread snapping clean in half. I nodded once. We shouldn't. For a second, I think he expected me to take it back, to panic, to soften. When I didn't, something in his posture changed. He stepped back. Wow, he said under his breath. 4 years. And this is how it ends. You ended it, I said quietly. He laughed bitterly. Right, because I made one bad call. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that would reach him. So I grabbed a small bag, shoved in the essentials, phone charger, a change of clothes, my laptop, and walked toward the door. You leaving? He asked. I paused. Hand on the handle. Yes. For them. For me. That was the last thing I said to him. I drove to my parents' house in silence. Didn't turn on the radio. Didn't answer my phone. Didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. Over the next few days, my phone became a battlefield. At first, it was anger. How could you do this to me? You ruined everything. You're going to regret this. Then, it shifted. I miss you. We can fix this. I'll apologize to your sister. Then, finally, threats. If you don't come get your stuff by Friday, I'm getting rid of it. The apartment is mine now. Figure out how to get your name off the lease. I read everything. Responded to nothing. Until the lease message. Because that wasn't emotional. That was practical. And I wasn't about to let him rewrite reality there, too. I spoke to a lawyer the next morning. Not to sue him. Not to escalate, just to understand where I stood. Turns out, he couldn't just kick me out. The lease was in both our names. We either both agreed to end it, one of us bought the other out, or we stayed tied to it until March. Simple. Objective. Real. I texted him that. His reply came fast. Typical. You always hide behind technicalities when you're wrong. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I put my phone down, because for the first time in days, something was becoming very, very clear. This wasn't about a baby shower. It wasn't about one lie. It wasn't even about attention. It was about someone who would rather bend reality than face it. And someone who almost married him. Later that afternoon, Rebecca came by. She looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like something had been sitting on her chest since Saturday, and she hadn't figured out how to move it yet. We sat on the edge of my childhood bed, the same one we used to share during thunderstorms when we were kids. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you didn't say anything." I swallowed. "She would have kept going," she continued. "Right? Pretending." I nodded. "For months," she whispered. "Every appointment, every milestone, everything." Her hand rested on her stomach again. "And then, at the end," she said, her voice breaking just slightly, "she would have gotten sympathy for losing something that never existed. While She didn't finish. She didn't have to. "I know," I said softly. She looked at me then. "I don't know how to feel about the fact that you almost married him." The words weren't cruel, just honest. "I don't either," I admitted. We sat with that, the weight of it. The realization that sometimes the person you think you know isn't the person they actually are, and that sometimes you only find out when it's already too late to pretend otherwise. By the time I went back to the apartment, it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a place where something had already ended, just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. We agreed to meet in the afternoon, not alone. That had been my condition. Ethan brought his older brother Caleb, someone I'd always liked, someone steady enough to keep things from turning into another scene. I think, deep down, Ethan knew he needed that buffer too. Not for me. For himself. When I walked in, the air felt different, colder. Not because of the temperature, but because everything familiar now had a layer of distance over it. The couch where we used to watch movies. The kitchen counter where I'd found the ring sitting days ago, exactly where I left it. The hallway where we'd argued about paint colors, like it mattered. None of it mattered anymore. Ethan barely looked at me. "Let's just get this over with," he muttered. "Works for me," I said. We started in the living room. Caleb took the lead, clipboard in hand, like he was trying to turn this into something structured, something manageable. "Okay," he said, glancing between us. "We'll go room by room. Just call out what's yours." It should have been simple. It wasn't. "That coffee table is ours," Ethan said immediately. "I bought it before we moved in," I replied. "You picked it with me. I paid for it." That doesn't mean..." "Did you pay for it?" Caleb cut in calmly. Ethan hesitated. "No." "Then it's hers." Silence. A sharp one. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue again. Not there. Not in front of his brother. We moved on, item by item.
Lamp. Rug.
Kitchen appliances. Every object felt like evidence, proof of a life we built and dismantled in the same breath. At one point, Ethan stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. Caleb let out a slow breath. "Sorry," he said quietly. "You don't have to apologize," I replied. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I know. I didn't realize it was this bad." I didn't answer right away, because neither had I. Not until it was. After a moment, he added, more quietly, "I saw the video." I looked up sharply. "What video?" He frowned slightly. "You didn't know?" "No." "One of your cousins recorded the whole microphone thing," he said. "It's been going around." Of course it had. Of course someone recorded it. This is what the world does now. Turns moments into evidence, into stories, into something that lives longer than it should. "I'm sorry," Caleb added. "For what?" "For what she did," he said. Then, after a pause, "I love him. But right now, I don't like him very much. That landed deeper than I expected, because it was honest, and because it meant I wasn't the only one who saw it. When Ethan came back out, we finished quickly. Neither of us had the energy left for drawn-out arguments. In the end, we reached an agreement. He would take over the lease, sign a new one in just his name. His parents would cover my portion of the rent until March as a buyout. I didn't want their money, but I wanted out. Clean. Final. So, I accepted. Over the next few days, I came back with Caleb while Ethan was at work and packed the rest of my things. Each trip felt lighter, not because I was leaving something behind, but because I was. The last time I walked out, I paused in the kitchen. The ring was still there, exactly where I left it. I picked it up, turned it once between my fingers, then set it back down. I didn't want it, not as a memory, not as closure, not as anything. I didn't realize how far things had spread until my phone buzzed from a number I didn't recognize. You're letting your family destroy my reputation. Ethan. New number. Of course. I'm getting messages from people I haven't talked to in years, the text continued. My coworkers are asking if I faked a pregnancy. This is harassment. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back once. I didn't post anything. I don't control what other people do. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, take responsibility for your family. I read that twice, then blocked the number. Because no matter how he framed it, this wasn't something I created. It was something he revealed. Later, I heard the rest through the family grapevine. The video hadn't gone viral in some massive internet way, but it had traveled. Through relatives, through group chats, through friends of friends. Enough. Enough that people saw exactly what happened. Ethan taking the microphone, making the announcement, unprompted, confident. His version of events, where I pressured him into it, fell apart under 30 seconds of footage. Some people still believed him, some didn't. Most just moved on. That's the part no one tells you. Even the worst moments of your life eventually become background noise in someone else's. A week later, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. 3 pages. I knew it was from him before I opened it. The handwriting gave it away. Careful. Controlled. Slightly slanted, just like him. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one thing I bought for myself after moving into my new studio, and read it slowly. He didn't try to deny what he did. That was the first surprise. Instead, he tried to explain it. He wrote that the fake pregnancy wasn't really about Rebecca, that it was about him. About feeling like he was disappearing, like our relationship, my family, everything around him was slowly swallowing who he was. He said watching Rebecca be celebrated made something inside him snap, that he felt invisible, unimportant, replaceable. He said he wasn't asking me to take him back, that he knew that was over, but he wanted me to understand that he wasn't a monster, that he was someone who made a terrible decision while drowning. He ended it with, I hope someday you can forgive me. Not for me, for you. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Here's the truth. I believe him. Not all of it, but enough. I believe he felt invisible. I believe he didn't know how to handle it. I even believe, somewhere under everything else, he didn't intend to cause the kind of damage he did. But none of that changes what actually happened. Feeling small doesn't justify making someone else smaller. Feeling unseen doesn't give you the right to steal someone else's moment. And pain, real or imagined, doesn't excuse turning someone else's joy into your stage. He might not be a monster, but what he did? That was monstrous. And I could understand him without ever accepting him again. A few days later, Rebecca came over again. She brought takeout. We sat on the floor of my apartment because I still hadn't bought a proper couch yet. I keep thinking about that day, she said. Me too. She hesitated. I cried that night. My chest tightened. I'm so sorry. It wasn't just him, she added quickly. It was everything. After everything we went through, I just wanted one perfect day. Her voice cracked, and it felt like the universe still wouldn't give it to me. I reached for her hand. "You deserved that day," I said softly. She squeezed my fingers. "Hey," she said after a moment. "You saw it when it mattered." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "You saw who he was," she said. "Right there. And you didn't protect him. You protected me." The words settled over me slowly, because until that moment, I hadn't thought of it like that. I'd thought of it as destruction, as loss, as something I ruined. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was something I stopped. By the end of that week, the apartment was no longer mine. The lease was resolved. The relationship was over. And I was standing in a space that was entirely my own for the first time in years. It wasn't big, it wasn't impressive, but it was quiet, honest, mine. And for the first time since that baby shower, I could breathe again. My niece was born 8 weeks later, 7 pounds, 6 ounces. A full head of dark hair and the kind of tiny, perfect face that makes the entire world feel like it's been reset to something softer. We were all at the hospital. My parents pacing. My grandmother pretending she wasn't nervous while asking the nurse the same question 3 different ways. Me, sitting in the waiting area, staring at the double doors, like if I looked long enough, I could somehow make time move faster. When Adam finally came out, his face said everything before he even spoke. "She's here." That was it. 2 words. And suddenly my mom was crying. My dad was hugging him so hard he almost knocked him over. And I was crying too, which surprised me. I don't cry easily. I didn't cry when I ended my engagement. I didn't cry when I packed up my life into boxes. I didn't cry when I read Ethan's letter, but I cried there, in a hospital waiting room, over a baby I hadn't even met yet. They let me see her about an hour later. Rebecca looked exhausted, completely drained, in a way that made her seem both fragile and unbelievably strong at the same time. But she was smiling, not the polite, strained smile from the baby shower, a real one, the kind that reaches your eyes and stays there. "Do you want to hold her?" she asked. My heart stuttered. "Are you sure?" She laughed softly. "She's your niece." I stepped forward carefully, like one wrong move might break something sacred. And she placed the baby in my arms. She was so small, so warm. Her fingers curled instinctively around mine. And for a second, everything else, every argument, every text, every moment of doubt just disappeared. She blinked up at me with those unfocused newborn eyes, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Something steady, something grounding. "You're going to be the best aunt," Rebecca said quietly. I let out a small breath. "I'm going to try." "You already did," she replied. I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She smiled, softer this time. "You protected my baby shower. That counts." And for the first time since all of this started, I laughed. Not bitter. Not forced, real. Because somehow, in the middle of everything that went wrong, something had still been preserved. The next day, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "I heard your sister had her baby. I'm happy for her. Ethan." "Of course, I know I can't take back what I did," the message continued. "But I wanted you to know I'm in therapy now. I'm trying to figure out why I am the way I am." I leaned back against my couch, reading slowly. "I'm not reaching out to get you back. I know that's over. I just wanted you to know that something changed in me after everything. I'm trying to be better." I sat there for a long time, long enough for 3 different responses to form in my head. Ignore it, destroy it, question it. Instead, I typed something else. "I appreciate you telling me. I hope therapy helps. Take care of yourself." I read it once, then hit send. That was it. No reopening doors, no revisiting the past, no giving him space to turn this into something else. Because whatever growth he found, if it was real, it wasn't mine to manage anymore. Life didn't snap back into place after that. It doesn't work like that. There was no perfect ending where everything balanced out neatly. Ethan didn't lose everything. He still had his job, his apartment, some of his friends, his family. He was still standing, just without me, and without the version of the future we had built together. And strangely, that felt right. Because I didn't want him destroyed. I just wanted him gone from my life, far enough away that his choices couldn't touch mine anymore. A few weeks later, I was sitting in Rebecca's living room, my niece asleep in her bassinet a few feet away, my mom and grandmother taking turns arguing softly about whether she looked more like Rebecca or Adam, my dad pretending he wasn't completely obsessed while checking on her every 5 minutes. Normal. Warm. Whole. I watched all of it quietly and realized something. 8 weeks ago, someone tried to take this from us. Not the baby, not the future, but the moment, the joy, the simplicity of it. And I didn't let them. Not because I was brave, not because I was perfect, but because in that moment, I chose the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it cost me everything I thought I wanted. My therapist told me something last week. You're not responsible for who someone turns out to be, she said. Only for how you respond when they show you. I think about that a lot now. Because I did respond. I told the truth. I walked away. I let go of something that looked right on the outside, but was wrong at its core. And now, I'm here. In a quiet room, with a sleeping baby, and a future that feels uncertain, but honest. My niece stirred slightly in her sleep, her tiny hand twitching like she was reaching for something in a dream. She doesn't know anything about what happened. The lie, the microphone, the silence, the fallout. She just exists, brand new, untouched by any of it. And that's what matters now. Not the mess behind me, but the life in front of me. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet settle around me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt like something had been cleared. Space. For better things, for real things, for a life that didn't need to compete for attention because it was already enough.